I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get just by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk. Gotta keep quiet, maneuver in silence to let them in, chalk up their body.
Hello and welcome, JK+1. I am not your host, PTF. He said he was sleeping in today because he was getting ready for the TRF barbecue. So I guess he's still in bed. It's midday. Must be nice. I am your host, Jonathan Kinchin, and I got a fun guest today. One of my dear friends, Pete Rotondo Jr. There's a senior out there, but I got Junior from horse player fame, from the Breeders' Cup, from First now, and we hear some of his stories of growing up in the backyard. It's a ton of fun. You'll enjoy it. Love Pete. Pete's one of those guys that people in racing, they see him all the time, but he's been a lot of behind the scenes in his career. And horse players, obviously, he was front facing, but it's always good to catch up with him. I want to thank our friends at Qatar Racing. And hopefully they got some stuff lined up for us here to wrap up the end of the meet, and we'll be catching up with Sheikh Fahad tomorrow night for dinner. So hopefully I'll have some stuff to report back about Qatar Racing. So let's just jump right into it. We've got Pete for a little over an hour to talk about his life in racing and a little bit about what he's got going on here at First and what he was doing at Breeders' Cup. My buddy, Pete Rotondo. Pete, what's going on?
What's happening, JK?
Oh, I told Pete Fornatel a little bit earlier. We recorded something before I hopped on with you, and I said it's winding down. He's like, "What's up, winding down? It's almost 2 hours." Like, dude, it's winding down. Like, I'm not saying that it's not. We still don't have some things to accomplish, but it's winding down.
I know. What a long run, right? I mean, it's like you forget the grind that is Saratoga during this meet. I was looking at the date. I mean, it's August 22nd. It's like opening day over here was like July. Was it July 13th or something? It's like we've been going at this for 5 weeks already.
Well, we're at this point now where, like, when I'm handicapping or we're on the show or whatever, and they show a replay of a horse that ran opening weekend, it feels like it was last year.
Well, for you especially, because you're out there, you're every day having to be on the air and look presentable and sound smart. I don't know how you do it.
What is your kind of your Saratoga schedule now? Like, what I know that we'll get into the history of, basically being an everydayer. Are you an everydayer now, or do you have a couple of days you try to protect for work?
Well, work, obviously, I'm working, right? So I'm working with Aiden and First Racing, right? So I'm usually Monday, Tuesday, I'm home at the computer the whole time. Wednesday through Friday, I try to get to the track for the late pick 5. And where I sit in the backyard, we have outlets. So I literally can plug in the phone and the computer and just sit there. And it's as if, like anything else, it's like I'm anywhere. So I'm always plugged in, and it's a perfect spot. It's my favorite place as far as, being in that backyard for 7-8 weeks a year,
Well, speaking of the backyard, for a lot of people that don't know, you are affectionately referred to, you and your crew, your dad, Lee, are affectionately referred to as the Pounders by the Matisses because of the way that you roll up the paper and cheer and pound. We'll get into the history of that. But it's also funny to me that, like, I met you guys in like different arenas. Like, I met you more like behind the scenes professional horse racing. I met them of like players, but you guys have been basically sitting in the same spot for a very, very long time together, but you didn't really know each other. You met each other at the spot.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been coming up since I'm 4 months old, right? When I was living in, grew up in Staten Island, and I was living in Manhattan for a while, but I would come up for fun, obviously as a fan since I'm a baby. And we had one spot for about 10 years back there. And then we moved over to a bank of TVs, actually right next to the spot we're in right now, which is right next to the Big Red Spring. And then about 10 years later, we moved over. And then, so we merged in with the Matisse brothers, Figsville, as you know, they're affectionately known. And Paul, of course, is one of the coolest, smartest, interesting guys, that exists, right? The guy is so sharp. And he, as you know, he writes these recaps every day of what goes on over there. And he nicknamed us the Pounders. So I'm Peter Pounder Jr. Pounder Sr. is my father. And then Lee Pounder is Lee. So we got Team Rotondo. And now I got the babies. So it's Rose E. Pounder and Sienna Pounder.
Does Shona have a Pounder nickname too?
Yeah, well, Shona, before she was she showed up before she was, quote, a pounder, right? So, so to speak. So she is Shona Dots, because she used to wear these polka dots every day for a couple of weeks. And Paul, as you know, picks up on these things. So yeah, she's Shona Dots.
It's funny. It's a behind the scenes thing that I don't know if we've talked about this areas before, but like for those who are just listening. So there's like a private message board that Paul has, and the Matisses have. And every day at the end, he recaps the day and writes it like a big journal and like literally says everything that happens. So-and-so was making fun of so-and-so about his shoes and kept calling him this. So-and-so went to go get Shake Shack, but didn't give us any change, and like tells a whole story. And then he tells everyone who comes by, if you stop back by there, he'll mention that you stopped by. And if you're a member of the board, he says, the members and the people that did. And it's really hilarious. And it's also a great thing that he does for everyone to be able to look at. And I don't know how the hell he remembers all that stuff.
No, it's the most insane thing ever. And it is nice if you're not there. It's a way to keep up with what happened. And he just, for example, like here, FigCom members noticed in Figsville. Yabo, Trooper, Chick, Pounder Jr., Pounder Sr., Greenspan, Battler, Telray, Bobo, Duke, Johnny B, Walnuts, Peyton, Who'sant, Boss Man, Paul, Off the Hook, Joe. And then Fig.com moments noticed in Figsville, and then other people, and people have stopped by, and he's got nicknames for every single person. Her drinking pals, Dr. Amanda, Val the nanny, which is Rosie's nanny, a ton of Pounder visitors. Off the Hook Lindsay, Off the Hook daughters, the Grand Salami brothers, the odd couple who only comes this week. They go on and on. 70s mustache Tony. I'll leave you with that one.
70s mustache Tony.
It's the truth. So anyway, for everybody out there, it's come one, come all. We're right next to the Big Red Spring, essentially. The last bank of TVs that are around, and purple, obviously identified by the purple tablecloths. Thanks to Who'sant for getting them every morning.
Lots of Travers under your belt, I'd imagine. You've been, like you said, you've been coming since. Now, what would you guys do? Before we get to the Travers. So did you guys just like come up for the day? Did you drive up? Did you stay the night? Did you come for the whole meet? Like how did you guys do it?
Yeah. So my father came for the first time in the 70s. I think I came, obviously I was born in 1975. So, he would come up at some point. There was a stretch where we would come up for like a week, and then it would come up for maybe 2 weeks, or then we would come up for like, depending on the year with his work or whatever, a couple of weekends here and there. So it all sort of changed every year until I got, working, and then I was up there, weeks at a time, and then now I live here. But yeah, so it was like it was home away from home. And the city, as anywhere you go as a kid, right? You show up, you go downtown, it's just that feeling of it's nostalgic, right? It's like you remember how happy you were as a kid, and now to be here all the time is awesome. There's no two ways about it. As long as you could travel, because it does after the meet's over, you're ready to start moving again.
Now you started as a fan, but then you started working in racing, and basically your professional life has been in racing. What was kind of your origin story with your career in racing?
So real simple. I go to the track every weekend with my father, right? We went to Belmont, we went to Saratoga, we went, obviously Aqueduct. I spent many weekends at Aqueduct as a kid with my grandparents. There was a priest there. There was Herbie. There was all these old men and me. So we hung out there. And so I knew I loved it. I just didn't know what I wanted to do in the game. And then seriously, I know it's probably heard this story, cliche-ish, but in the program, there was a racetrack industry program ad and then Harvey Pack used to talk about it on his show. And I was like, oh my God, I got to go here. I was like, how cool is this? Like, you can have a degree in racing, basically. So long story short, I went to Seton Hall for 2 years in New Jersey, transferred to the U of A, got my 4 year. I was only there a year and a half, but I figured out a way to get a 4-year degree, and that's how it started.
And then what was DRF? Was that your first?
Yeah. So Mandy Minger, who is one of the greatest ladies of all time. She hired me basically out of school. It was a gentleman named Paul Kornman that used to be a big New York horse owner, and he actually used to be on TV. He used to do before there was talking horses, like before each race. He connected me to her, and so I started in customer service for the DRF in '98, and then the NTRA had just launched, and they had a New York office. So long story short, I went with them. They merged with the Breeders' Cup on an operational merger, so I was working for both, and then I fell out on the Breeders' Cup side for almost 20 years.
Customer service. What people calling you saying?
Oh my God, it was hysterical. So basically, they would call. I would have a lot of old guys calling me and asking me what the new symbols meant in the racing form, and I would have to talk. I talked to them for hours at a time. Some of these guys, because there was like, imagine that was my job, to explain the DRF to some people. How cool. Obviously, knew the DRF like I knew any book I've ever read. And then they had other stuff where you could. Back then, it was like the charts, the DRF charts. They were on CD-ROMs, and like literally, we were selling CD-ROMs of charts out of that office in New York. So it was a fun. Steve Christ was actually the boss at that time, and actually before that, he was my boss. I interned at NYRA, so the only time I actually worked for NYRA was when I was like 19. Bill Nader was my boss, who's now, of course, went to Hong Kong, and now he's with the TOC in California. One of the greatest guys of all time. I worked for him in the basement of Belmont when he ran simulcasting at the time. So literally, he's been around a long, long time. And now, as you know, I'm with First. My man Aiden Butler, who is one of the greatest guys of all time. Smart, passionate, and we have a great, great team over there. So I'm blessed all over. I cannot complain about anything.
So Breeders' Cup. Because even we were friends, and because you were behind the scenes, I was always like, well, what does Pete do? I know he does a lot with the TV stuff. He does a lot with the marketing. He does a lot with handling the kind of the lifestyle things. What would describe your time at Breeders' Cup?
Yeah, so I started off doing just the TV, right? So at some point, at the beginning of Breeders' Cup, when I was there, and then with the NTRA, there was ESPN was the partner. There was the Road to the Kentucky Derby. Then there was the Road to the Breeders' Cup. And at some point, many moons ago, we had a show on ESPN or ESPN2 every weekend. I mean every weekend, from Belmont to Breeders' Cup, except for that 3 weeks before the event. So I was the middleman between the racetracks, the Breeders' Cup. We sold all the advertising. I didn't do that necessarily. There was a sponsorship team, but I made sure all their stuff got in the show. I worked with all the talent on storylines and the producers and post times, making sure that was all coordinated. So that was like the main gig. And of course, we wound up doing it. Actually, we wound up doing some shows with CBS, and then of course NBC. So I've been connected on that TV side. I was the middleman for many years under many different series, so to speak, right? And then of course, Breeders' Cup's not that big, right? So we had on the PR side, trying to get stories placed on we created the celebrity ambassador program, working with, if you liked horses, we were like, oh, you need to be with us. So, from Elizabeth Banks, Bo Derek, Jim Rome, Joe Torre, even like Rob, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, the skateboarder guy. Anyway, Deerdick. Yeah. We had a whole crew, and Rashard Lewis, of course, and the idea was I was the middleman on that as well, trying to get them to promote it, social. And then, from booking the national anthem singer to being in the TV truck, like it was like an all-encompassing thing. And then when social media, of course, came around, I ran the social, which I guess, was almost like a blessing in disguise, because at the end of the day, that's not the most fun gig.
It's just hard. It's just like you gotta be clever all the time, and like you can't just like be matter of fact, because then it's kind of boring.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, you know, it's funny. To back up just a little bit, I meant to say this earlier, and I went to the Breeders' Cup thing. Funny enough, and I know you know this, Mandy Minger, also the first person to ever hire me in racing.
No way. Oh my God.
Yes, well, her and Ken Kirkner, but basically her when she was at DRF, when I had my good run at the NHC, and then like she like signed me up for like a spokesman deal that was like, you know, I was so excited about it at the time. And it was literally, you know, it was not a lot of money at all, but it was cool though. Like I was like, oh dang, I'm in. Yeah. And so I'm always, anytime she ever asks me to do anything, she's working with Hissa now. Anytime she ever asks me to do anything, I just say yes. Cause like I owe her. She's the best. She's the best. Okay. Let's pop back in the backyard. Travers. It's Travers week. I'm sure you've been to your handful of Travers. Any Travers stories that kind of stick out to you?
Yeah, you know, I did the math yesterday. I think I've been to 35 Travers, which is insane because they think that I'm that old. But yeah, well, yeah. So it was funny. It's not exactly funny, I guess. 1987, Java Gold won the Travers and the slop. And that morning there was King's Tavern, which is across the street from Saratoga. Used to be Bruno's. And before that, it was something else. But Bruno's at the time it was called, and they had a breakfast and they had lunch, they had dinner, whatever. Long story short, I was literally choking on a piece of bacon. Like it was it. I couldn't breathe. Whatever. My father came behind me and gave me the Heimlich maneuver. Got it out, and we went up. We went 7 for 9 that day. I'll never forget. I was on fire the rest of the day, and we hit Java Gold. So it was memorable, like because I survived the morning, but we got hot during the day as well. I would say that's the most memorable Travers in my head. But you know, I was a big easy goer guy, of course, and you know, watching him dominate back then. But there's been so many great races, and again, 99% of them. Well, that's not true. So about 75% of them were in the backyard. But then we had the Travers on ESPN and NBC for many years. So I was in the TV truck for a lot of those. And, you know, the memorable one would be the Birdstone one where, you know, the thunderstorm came in. Like it was the end of the world, lightning, thunder. They ran the race in it. And you thought like we were like, we're going to go off the air here. I mean, like it was so bad. You've lived through them now since you've been on the set, right? It's the scariest thing in the world. When you're in the TV truck, we're like, what if we get hit by lightning over here? It's going to be crazy. But
yeah, it's just that Birdstone one was so dark. Like watching the video now. God.
Right. Kenny Mayne, you know, was my man. He was up there. He was like, you know, running for his life, so to speak. But there's so many great memories.
You've been around the you know, racing and TV for quite some time. I'd imagine it probably gave you a sense of pride. At least I thought it was pretty cool. I want to say Haskell weekend. There was at one time on 2 major networks, on Fox and on NBC, horse racing was on. And I thought that was pretty damn cool, you know, to be able to kind of like be on, not, you know, we're not on some, you know, cable channel you got to flip through. We were on big Fox and big NBC at the same time.
Yeah, no, and listen, I mean, you compare some of these TV ratings and these, you know, to other sports, and you know, they hold up still to this day. So win, lose, or draw, and you know, there's the audience is so splintered, right? I mean, I could watch the simulcast show on your ADW, which again, if you're hardcore, that's what you're probably doing, right? And then, of course, you can watch it on the network, or for you guys, you know, you're watching FS1, FS2. And on the YouTube. So you got to add all those numbers together, and the audience is substantial. So yeah, it's cool to see them, you know, both literally highlighted on the same day for sure.
You had some seminar experience at Saratoga.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So back in the Harvey Pack used to host what they called the Paddock Club. It was at noon, right next to the paddock. And he'd bring on guests, whatever. Before that, there was Brad Thomas, who a lot of people know from Monmouth, and a guy named Mark Siegelab. They used to host the seminar before the seminar. And we used to go all the time. My dad and my father used to recreate the Travers race call as Fred Capicella, his voice. And one year I did I did the King's Bishop, which is now the Alan Jerkins, as Trevor, as a 12-year-old. And it's funny, people still remember that. I walk around in the backyard, they're like, I remember when you called the race at 12 years old, which is insane because I'm 100. And then our good friend Andy Serling, when I was 19, I was in the racetrack program, and he hosted the post parade seminar. This was after Mark and Brad's, hit their time there, and after, might have been before. Harvey could have still been around. This could have been the pre, but it was called post parade because that's the name of the program. And I came on with him, and I will never forget. I went 5 for 9 that day, exactas, but shockingly was never asked back. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, Andy said, "Nah, big fella, not today."
That's it. 19-year-old, but it was always fun. I mean, just to be involved in any of that, it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of what it's funny. Like it's moments like that. I think that like when you as a young horse player, you kind of have some success, and it's so rewarding because you see everyone around you not having success, or like it just always being a struggle. So when you finally do get the puzzle right, it's a rewarding thing. Like, I remember hitting my first try at Lone Star Park, and like, I just thought it was the coolest thing. And that's what made me want to kind of keep trying to chase that feeling of just being right, and predicting this outcome. It was,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, that's, my one highlight, I would say, in recent years, it was 2019 Kentucky Derby. I would, on Facebook, I put out this $100 betting strategy every year for the Triple Crown. And again, if you followed me for the last 10 years, you're probably down, 400, let's say, I mean, at the end of the day, because I'm trying to go for a score here and there. We hit a couple races. We hit like the American Pharaoh Preakness. We hit the some of those Justify in the Belmont. Nothing crazy necessarily, but long story short, $100 strategy. I put it up there, and I liked Country House in that race, and then that bottom line, that $100 strategy turned into 15,000. So all my friends who bet maybe once or twice a year, of course, bet it, right? And then I had no clue about where this thing would go, but they send it around to their friends, right? Because they're like, oh, we know what, we got a horse guy, whatever. Long story short, my Venmo started blowing up. People I didn't know started sending me money. Like they were like tipping me, whatever. I was like, and then I was like, oh my God, this must be gone far and wide. And then I got all these screenshots of all these people's accounts, 15, 30, 45, 50. And then one guy literally bet it for $1,000, the strategy. He got back 160,000 and left in a police car, Churchill Downs.
Oh my goodness.
No joke. It's the truth.
So surely you were sweating.
Oh my God. It was unbelievable. Yeah. Well, originally when I heard Country House claim foul, I was like, what? He didn't do anything, right? Flavian Pratt, right? He claimed foul. I was like, there's nothing to claim foul about. Then they started showing the replays, and I was at Churchill that day, and I'm like, oh my God, he totally can't. He War of Will was almost, knocked him over. I was like, he's coming down, and then everyone's like, he can't come down. It's the Derby, blah blah blah. But I was like, but he almost, knocked him over, It was wild. I mean, it was just like I hit the exacta, the trifecta, the whole thing. And it was the most crazy 22 minutes ever. Plus, because you knew it was big, obviously, because Country House was such a big price,
Were you a winner? Were you a winner the way that it stand with him in second?
Yeah. So my backup tickets, it was funny. The $100 strategy was like winner, 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 winner. And then there was the first or last I always do a first or last, was Maximum Security. So I keyed him over Country House and the other horses that ran in the money. So yeah, I was fine. And in fact, Shona had Maximum Security on top and everything. I still have her tickets here. So she got DQ'd. I'm like, oh well, sorry, Sha. But this one was a little big. So we had we got through the apologies pretty quick.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable. And
then the final part of that story is two of my best friends, Mike Lasky and Sonny Armenta from college. She and Mikey, they literally call me. They're like, we won so much money. We're buying you a dog. as a tip. I'm like, what? I was like, we're not giving you any money. We're bringing you a dog. You need a dog. I'm like, so I was showing, I was like, listen, Lasky will show up with a dog. So get involved. And now we have, of course, Steward S. Inquiry, Stewie, because of that trifecta.
Oh, my man, Stewie.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Like, yeah, there's the gifts that keep on giving.
Now, so the first time I got involved in racing pretty heavy. I would say like 2010, 8, 10, fan level, just, whatever, got involved. And one of the first things that really kind of led to my tournament success was seeing you and the others, not all of them, and the others, actually probably that one the most, because I wanted to beat him, and I have taken his greatest accomplishment and put it in my pocket as well. Horse players.
Mm-hmm.
It was I've got it downloaded. I've been telling Jovanina, because she's never seen it. We have to watch this. You have to see it. You're gonna die when you see this show, because now she knows she would be able to watch it and enjoy it, because she knows all the characters and she knows like the game more. Tell me start to finish how horse players came about, because we've heard it before, right? Someone's making this reality show, and then they want to talk to you. How did it all start? How did it all finish?
Yeah, so Brian Pettigrew, one of the great guys in our industry, was my boss for a while there at the Breeders' Cup. But before he was my boss, he met this production company somewhere along the line, and they were coming to the NHC. They were interested in creating this series around horse players. They didn't know how it would all turn out or whatever. So they said, all right, Brian, can you suggest to mic a few people at the NHC? So long story short, they mic'd me. They mic'd a couple other, you know what? It's funny. I don't really remember who they mic'd at that event itself, but I was definitely involved. And I'm like, of course. And Dad and Lee were there, and we were sitting with Mike Baychak, who, of course, that was the year he wound up winning $1 million in the last race by a nose, by $1 by a nose, and he won $1 million. Right? That was the coolest. I mean, that was all on video. So these guys were like, oh my God, this is we got gold here, right? I mean, look, this guy just won $1 million and by a nose in the last race of the contest, right? So they took it, they pitched it around, they made a sizzle reel basically, right? They would go around and they pitched it to various networks. And then it was called the Esquire Network, was about to launch. It had been the Style Network on NBC Universal family, and they switched it to Esquire. Esquire said, all right, we're in. In the meantime, I was friendly with the producers of Jockeys. It was called Go Lucky, was the name, of course, ironically, the name of the production company. This woman named Tina, she was great. She, loved Dad and Lee. They had shot a sizzle reel called The Saints of Staten Island, which is a whole nother story. Anyway, long story short, they get involved somehow. They wound up becoming the producers of the show. And I'm basically trying to coach them along on how, what are we going to do? Who are we going to follow? How are we going to do this? Because, we're just going to show up at the track and show horse guys betting. I was like, well, there's this thing called the NHC. There's sort of like a tour where there's like big contests all over the place. I guess, why don't we follow that? And basically that's how it started. And they cast some people on their own. Obviously I brought Team Rotondo to it. And Baychak, I talked into doing it. Matt Bernier, our boy, right? Of course, he had been at the NHC as one of the youngest guys ever to play in it. So he got involved through Keith, and then they found some other people along the way. So that's really how it all started. And it was they wound up spending $6 million was the production budget for 10 episodes. And what happened at the end of the rainbow there is, unfortunately, the production had a way they wanted to do it. The network wanted to do it a different way. And there was a constant fighting, and I'm sure this happens all the time. And the show was okay. Like, it turned out okay. Plus, we never won. Nobody won. That was the problem. We lost so much on that show, which was a shame because actually afterwards, Matt wound up winning the contest at Aqueduct. Christian, of course, won some big horse player tournament in Vegas. Baychok won something. So everybody wound up winning after the fact, but it was too late at that point. They always thought they were going to second season, but it never happened because, again, the network started to fail anyway, and the production company, they just couldn't agree on anything. But really, that was the whole rainbow. And as you know, the NHC at that point, tour went up 40%. The interest was through the roof for the tournaments, and really kind of kickstarted, the horse tourneys of the world and the horseplayers.com and that stuff. So anyway, it was a blast to do it, as you can imagine, being on the road with my dad and Lee. So it was fun.
Oh, it's 100% why I got involved in contests. Like, it's part of my origin story. Like, I watched the show. I had never played in a contest. I watched the show, and then it's just kind of thing like, wow, these guys are like playing. Like, I wonder if I could compete with these guys. I wonder if I could go to one of these contests and do well. And then I got for Christmas, I got Pete's book, The Winning Contest Player. Right. Read the book. They made ADWs illegal in Texas, where if I wanted to play the Pick 5, I had to drive from Austin to San Antonio to Retama Park, about an hour each way to play. And one day I jumped on not horse players at the time. It was what was that? I don't even remember what the website was. What was the old BCBC Qualify, bcqualify.com. Yeah. And I played in a contest and I qualified for the BC in my first attempt to do so. So I'm thinking, oh shit, like I can do this. I can participate. And then I went to the breed, and then I started playing in the NHC too. I qualified in the NHC in that first year. And another story that I think people might forget is I got a second entry for the NHC because I ran fourth in a contest on horse players or horse tourneys that gave away 3 seats. I was fourth. And unfortunately, Ron Rippey passed away. And when he passed away, they gave me that seat, his seat, as the second seat that I got, which was the second entry that I brought to the final table, that got the attention that I got, to get Mandy involved, to start doing the podcast, to start doing all this other stuff that I did that led to what has happened now.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Crazy. Yeah, it was when Ron Rippey passed. That's how I got the second entry.
Yeah, because they had that rule, right? If that person's not there, then they go to the next one. If you happen to have been in Vegas, you were going to get it. Oh my God, that's crazy.
I know. I can't remember if Keith Chamlin called me to tell me or if it was Michelle that told me. But anyways, yeah. So it was, your that part of your career and your life was an origin for me. What do you remember about filming it? Was it hard? Were you there all day? Did they follow all of you around all day? Like, how was the filming of Horseplay?
Yeah, it was, reality TV, right? It was 80% what exactly happened. And then 20%, okay, can you feed us? Can you give us this line here to try to bridge scenes together? There was some scenes that were like, manufactured in the sense that and they didn't use some of the really good stuff. Long story short, I used to go to Gulfstream every summer. I mean, every winter with my dad, right? I never saw sand. I was at the hotel till 1:00, Gulfstream. Hollywood, maybe we go to the dog track, or we go to Pompano, or we go to Dania Highlight at night, right? There was no beach involved, right? Never saw sand in Florida for 10 years, 15 years. So I would always go to Gulfstream. And the part of it, so they said, all right, well, we want your dad and Lee on a boat to see if they could fish or something. I'm like, okay, whatever. So long story short, I got, they staged this thing where I would call them and say, I was like, all these years I would go to Florida, I never were on the water. I was like, I resent that, bullshit, whatever. Next thing I was like, you're going to go, if you want to eat tonight, you're going to have to go fish for your dinner. So my father, who can't swim and is afraid of the water, right? And Lee, supposedly they had, I saw the footage. They had on these swimmies, and they had on a life jacket, whatever. And they're out there trying to fish. And again, silly as could be, priceless stuff, especially if you like them, right? And never made the airwaves. Then they didn't use it. So like, yeah, it's just silly. Like, so they, some of the character development stuff they could have really dove into, which would have been fun to see the back, but they didn't do that. So but other than that, I mean, it was fun. I mean, we're in New Orleans together. I mean, legitimately, we went to me, Dad, Lee, and Christian. It was positioned that he was going to take us to a voodoo place to get cleansed because we were jinxed. So we wound up at this place, which was kind of weird, right? I mean, legit, I was uncomfortable being there. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched the scene back, but they're blowing smoke down literally my butt crack. Like this girl, she's blowing smoke down my ass. And I'm like, we got our hands up and we got voodoo dolls and we're like trying to cleanse ourselves from being like losers, essentially, how we always lose the photos. And I'm like, what is going on? People are going to see this, like whatever. And meanwhile, of course, Lee wound up qualifying for the NHC the next day, like actually happened. He wound up getting a huge tattoo on him called Mama Shun. That was the name of the spirit that we prayed to. That was supposed to be part of the show, and they never used it. So Lee's got a huge Mama Shun tattoo on him. Never made air because that was the voodoo princess that helped us qualify for the NHC.
My favorite is Matt Bernier's outfit to the Derby.
Oh my God, that was.
What do you have? Like he had like a polo and like wind pants or something.
He had no idea. That was the first time I met him, and we were both on Orb and all that stuff. Right? That was like still part of like the pilot episode, and he shows up, and I'm all suited up or whatever, and I'm like, what is this kid? Whatever. But he was so. I'm thinking what a nice guy, right? Obviously, we love him, but it was so much fun. But yeah, and then to this day I still have that photo, and then any moment I have a chance, I send it out. I send it to his producers. I put it out. Always comes up Derby week.
That's hilarious. Some of your celebrity run-ins with the Breeders' Cup. I mean, I know. I remember. I think did you get Snoop to do a cameo?
Yeah, it was COVID 2020. So we were doing all these like celebrity at home things where they were gonna give a pick or whatever. So we had Sean, with Seth Meyers, and a lot of those guys from The Office and from a couple of 30 Rock and those guys. And then I was like, there was the name of the horse was Highest Power, right? I'm like, we need Snoop. So I got in touch with the Cameo guys at the time, 2020. And long story short, yeah, we sent him a couple of bucks, and he did his Snoop stuff. And I had to write the script for Snoop, and I'm like, how am I gonna channel? I have to write something for him to say. It's Snoop Dogg. Me? That doesn't make any sense. So
I just give him a couple of bullet points.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he read it verbatim. I was like, but of course he put a little, and then he did his Snoop essence, and it was perfect. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy, some of those stories along the way. The coolest one of them all is Elizabeth Banks. I mean, listen, she's obviously a super successful actress, right? But she's also a producer, director. Her dad loves it, right? So he comes every year, no matter what. She comes if it's in California, she shows up, right? And she legitimately bets. I mean, one year this is before the tax laws changed, right? She was, IRS ticket, filling out superfecta. And then the funny part, I thought 2017 Delmar, she was always like the first interview on the NBC show, which was in prime time at the time. And I got to make sure she gets over there. So I'm like, all right, we got to go. She's like, oh my God, I lost all my tickets. I'm like, what do you mean you lost your tickets? She goes, I lost them. I don't know where they are. So she goes, I think I left them in the bathroom. So literally she runs. Now it's like, I had 8 minutes to get her there. We're on the other side of the track. She finds all of her trifectas on the bathroom floor, picks them all up. She's like, I found them. I mean, the degeneracy of that is tremendous, right? You got to the respect. I was like, you know what? She really cares. So she was super cool along the way. I mean, there's no doubt. And there's just been a bunch of those stories, where you're just trying to, and the goal there with the celeb stuff, right? People are like, oh, it's a waste of time and all this stuff. And well, the idea is that they show up and they share their experience on social, right? I mean, that's the whole point, to show them having fun, they're enjoying it. God forbid a new audience gets exposed to something, right? And I've been through, I mean, I've taken a lot of heat or indirectly for that whole effort along the way, and I never understood it. I'm like, it's what is wrong? If it's not costing us a lot of money, we're promoting, we're bringing people to the track. They have an audience. It's just marketing and promotion, So
well, well, first of all, people are stupid, and people like to complain about shit, and it's mostly because they're pathetic in their own scenario. But the thing about it is like, look, we love this game for various reasons, right? You fell in love with it. It was probably a great time for you to spend with your father. It was a great time for me to spend with my dad. But also, it was like, I kind of fell in love with the puzzle, and I fell in love with handicapping and the reward of being right and the gambling aspect of it. That's what I fell in love with. And my dad brought me there not to show me that, not to teach me that, but he brought me there. And then I found that on my own. And so right. when you do those types of things, when you do the concerts, when you do the giveaways, when you do the celebrity things, when you do the social media promotions and the influencer promotions, what you're trying to do is bring it to the attention of someone who wouldn't have found it. And then you bring them here, and then they can fall in love with it for all of the organic reasons that we all fell in love with it. But this idea that we're just going to scream at the top of our lungs about how good of a gambling game it is and why you should single a 20-1 shot and a pick six because that's great value, like that's not bringing people to the game. Sure, teach them that lesson once they're here, but you got to bring them here first. It makes complete sense to me, and it's bizarre to me that other people don't understand.
You're 1,000%. In my opinion, we're on the same 100. Yeah, we're on the same page. I mean, the idea, it's like they would not, it's part of a puzzle. It's a puzzle, which I'm not, there's a lot of work to do, right? There's only so much we can control, right? I mean, even the marketing guys or the promotional guys, but that whole influencer celebrity part is part of the puzzle, and it's all it is. And it's not the puzzle. It's like TV, right? TV is part of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. So it's like everybody gets so hung up on one thing because suddenly they read about it, they saw it, like that's the only thing being done. There's so much going on. Look, I mean, now working with First, as what are the two best, most fun events in horse racing? The Pegasus?
Yeah, the Pegasus. Yeah, they are. I've said that before. From a party standpoint, enjoy, drink, food, clothing, experience. Those two are the best. The best two racing days in racing are Breeders' Cup, Belmont Stakes, Derby. Those days are the best racing days, right? Like just wall to wall, grade 1 races, all that stuff. But there's no place I'd rather be than the Pegasus or the Preakness. It's the most fun events that we have, and like you can do both.
Exactly. And look, the Pegasus had broke all the handle records this year, and it's like it continues to grow, right? I mean, that's the idea. And the Preakness, I mean, listen, it didn't this year, and so it happens when you have a 7-horse field, right? But the event itself, my God, it's the most fun. Listen, there's some issues, right? Obviously, we got to figure out Pimlico and the whole 9 yards. But at the end of the day, it's one of the most fun places you could possibly go. And now Gulfstream, the way they have that set up with the Carousel Club, and just the vibe in the place on Pegasus Day is tremendous. But
the people that complain about that stuff, though, those are the type of people that like they can't have fun in a setting like that, right? Like they don't.
Right, but it's not like
even when we were talking about like the celebrity influencer idea, right? Here's the thing, is that I've been obviously, like, my wife loves racing, your wife loves racing, and that was independent of us. Like that, you didn't introduce Shona to racing. I didn't introduce Jovanita to racing. She'd been coming to Saratoga before, so it's easier for me to say. But for someone else who might have a partner that isn't interested, seeing Elizabeth Banks say that she loves racing makes it a little bit easier for a fellow who loves racing who's trying to introduce his partner to racing. It's it's a much better experience for her to get involved than it is taking someone to Turfway Park on a Wednesday in the winter walking into a smoky room with 78 guys. You know what I mean? Like that's not, that doesn't help grow the entire ecosystem of the game.
Exactly. And listen, as you know, there's a racing office, there's a racing executives that are there in charge of getting the product, the horses to show up. So it's not like you're sacrificing anything by doing it. It's like, that's what I never understood. Even they like, oh, they're spending so much time and effort. No, not really. I mean, it's time and effort's being spent on the whole thing. It's just part of the puzzle. Like it's not the entire thing. And so those at that point you just have to mute and move on, because you're trying for the greater good. And of course, listen, the wagering aspect, as you know, we're trying to come up with different things every other day, from these new wagers or in handicapping contests, the whole 9 yards. It's not like that's left behind. And there's other bigger issues out there that are being addressed. Everything's being addressed. It's not like, no one's burying their head in the sand at this point.
Yeah. No, the problem is that people think they have solutions, but they don't understand that solutions, the easy slam dunk solution they have, that there's levels to this shit. Like you can't just change takeout overnight. Like you can't just lower takeout. You have to have legitimate conversations with the horsemen so they can understand where the purses are going to go, how that could be affected by that. You have to convince them of that. You've got all the state taxes that you're responsible for. Like I even talked to certain people about doing a no takeout wager, and they're 100% into doing a no takeout wager. But the problem is you still got to pay the state tax. You still got to pay this fee, the 1% here, the 0.5% here. So it's like, it's just, yes, we need to do some things, and we're trying to do them, but the ridiculous impatience of certain folks that don't understand, and I mean this in a nice way, but I mean it honestly. They probably don't. They're either alone in their life, they don't understand compromise and trying to work through things, or they're very unhappy because they probably do the same thing in their home life, saying that this is the way that's going to happen and that's the way it's going to happen. Like there's got to be some you got to be political with it sometimes, to try to give a little, take a little, take a little, give a little. And
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're right. I mean, that's where, and again, it's not, that's the negative part of the, the social aspect of the game. Right. And it's the idea that, nobody's doing anything when we know everyone is doing everything they can, and the issues are being looked into, and we're trying to figure it out. It's just the bottom line. So anyway, but again, it's listen, I love this game. It's the most fun. I got these daughters now. They're bringing Rosie to the track, and she loves it. She loves the nays. And I ask her, who do you like in this race? 2-7. She got her own numbers now, 2-7. So it's like, I just wanted to go on, and I'm going to do everything I can and push the envelope internally, externally, and ask the tough questions and help try to find the answers. And that's just the bottom line, especially at this stage in my life. That's what I wanted to be here forever. So that's what I'm going to have to do.
You've worked in a lot of different aspects of the game, and obviously you guys are working on things behind the scenes that I don't expect you to say, because you got to kind of get balls moving before you can announce certain things. But like, what conversation do you wish that you could have with every racing executive, and that they could really hear you and you could get through to them on, that you think would kind of help the greater good of our game?
It's cooperation at the highest level, right? I think the stake schedule in America, the best horses, is just it's off balance, right? There's too many of them. It's just, we need some sort of road. I don't want to say a league necessarily, but it's like we need a road to promote. Like, all right, horses run here, then they run here, then they run here. Now I know it's going to be hard. I mean, the trainers dictate a lot of that stuff, and obviously the owners. But at the core of it is like, let's just try to create some sort of at a high level. I'm not going to talk about the lower levels. It is what it is. I mean, that's going to work itself out one way or another. We're talking about the high end, like as if it was the league, if it was the NFL, like, the best races around the country. Let's just organize things a little bit better, right? I mean, but I've been talking about this a long time, so I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like there is more discussions are happening behind the scenes than ever before about cooperation. And I think we got to get there. I think it's going to happen. And maybe we're forced into it, but win, lose, or draw, at the end of the rainbow is a coordinated schedule of the best horses and the best trainers and the best owners and the best jock, running over a period of time. So the bettors are confident in the product. That's where we got to go. Listen, as far as working with First, right? We have great events, right? From opening day at Santa Anita to the Preakness, right? You got Florida Derby, you got Fountain of Youth, you got Santa Anita Derby, right? So we're sort of creating this First racing tour, right? From the racing point of view, right? So grouping these races together, put a brand on it so we could go out and sell it. And working with NBC, working with different partners to get it on, to have some exposure. But ultimately, we have a racetrack in Miami and in LA, so to speak. We gotta bring that to the next level, and everyone's on board with that, right? So that's our season, and then of course Naira's season is from Belmont, through Saratoga, right? It's like, this is not that hard. We just got to sit and figure it out a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and the hard part about it, I think that some people miss, and look, I understand the frustration from the outside. I think we're obviously privy to certain conversations, and we hear about deals that are supposed to happen that don't happen, or things that could happen that don't happen, or you sit at tables and hear why we can't do this and why you got to do this and so there's a lot of information, I think, that's out there that you have that others might not have, or that we have. So I understand the frustration, but the problem is that, like, because we are all independently successful in different ways, it's hard at times to get people to bend where they feel as if they're giving away something that they've earned, right? Mm-hmm. And that is where I think a lot of the bumping of the heads comes at times when it comes to certain situations. It's like, Naira can call Churchill and say, hey, can you guys start at 1:30 because we want to stay off of you and start at 1:00? But Churchill might have their horsemen who say, no, we or we got to turn the lights on, or we can't do this because of that. And and there's all these reasons behind the scenes, but it just looks like Churchill and Naira aren't playing nice together. And
yeah.
And it's unfortunate because you'd like to get to a place where we, if Churchill gives, then Naira can then give, and then, and vice versa, we can get to a better place. But it's the same old story. Everyone's kind of protecting their piece of the pie and not always seeing how to make the pie bigger. Yeah,
no, that's true. But again, I do feel that that all is loosening up more than ever now. And I think we got a shot at getting there. I really do, because, and again, sometimes you're forced into these things. It's just the way the business goes. So, okay, well, let's adjust. But I think the conversations are happening. So I'm optimistic that it's, we're headed in the right direction when it comes to that and in that front, basically.
Well, I also think that, like, I think that there's a place for people with legal backgrounds to run racetracks and run, and to kind of be decision makers at different racing entities. I think there's a place for finance folks to be involved in running entities and things of that nature, whether it be ADWs or racetracks or television or whatever it might be. But I do think there has been a shift as of late where there's a lot more creatives that are finding themselves in position of decision making, because this is not a knock towards finance folks or towards legal types, but there's walls that are put up, and the same for creatives, right? Like you and I can come up with all these damn ideas and have no idea how illegal they are. Do you know what I'm saying? And and because our brains don't go to that point. And I think the same can be said the other way. And I think we're getting a bigger mixture of those decision makers where we can have some prominent marketing people, some creative people, some doers, some legal, some finance, to really help us come up with better ideas and concepts to help elevate the game. And I think that's, to your point, that's part of how I think things are kind of loosening up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. And at the end of the day, you look at other sports, the idea that Major League Baseball actually has essentially a shot clock. I mean, like, how could, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think you'd see that? I mean, for the pitcher, right?
No, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And it worked. And everybody loves it. And, and everything's sped up. And now it's like they're having a resurgence and stuff. It's like every sport changes. There's tweaks here and there, from NFL schedule to Major League to, baseball. I mean, the rules change. And then sometimes in racing, you're like, we can't do that. How could you move the dates of the Triple Crown? Like, all right, calm down. I mean, like, everything changes and you have to adapt. So again, I think it's going to happen. I think, and it's happening. It's happening behind the scenes, I think. So, I'm optimistic along the way.
Yeah, no, I am too. And I think that I think that's a good point. Like other sports, like really making adjustments, the protecting of the quarterback, where I think a lot of people in the old days would be like, well, that's what makes the game so good, hitting defenseless receivers. No, but the game's not good when Tom Brady's sitting down. It's not a good game when Justin Jefferson is got a concussion. He's out for 3 games. And I think that I can think of those examples in racing too, right? It's like, it's we don't. It doesn't make any sense for us for track so and so to run on top of Santa Anita, or track so and so to run on top of Oaklawn Park, or track so and so to run on top of Naira. It doesn't. It's silly, and well, that's just what we do. No, let's continue to try to adjust it a little bit.
Exactly.
Pete, what do you got? What's your Travers plan? Do you like a horse yet? That's another thing I was going to get you on before you left.
I look, it's funny, before, this morning I was looking at the field, and I'm like, I hate to be like that, right? I can make a case for any of them, right? Forte, he runs every time, and he runs. I haven't seen that in a while. Every single race is like he runs his eyeballs out, right? And he had that trip in the Jim Dandy, but I mean, really, he was tucked in there and then came out a little, right? So the idea is, I don't think that took much out of him. Mage was clearly prepping in the Haskell. Archangelo's been working lights out, right? I mean, working like a monster. And then you got throw Scotland in the mix, and National Treasure coming in. I mean, I got to see them PPs, and I got to see. I don't really care about the draw necessarily; just see it in front of me. But I mean, do you think we're gonna have like a pace hookup here with National Treasure and Scotland? Or you think National Treasure gets free?
Yeah, no, I think that they'll be forward. I think the pace will be honest enough. Even if one of them ends up kind of loose, I don't think they're going to walk the dog on the front end. I think that there'll be an honest enough pace in here. And I mean, I was talking about it with Pete Fornatell. I mean, it's pretty damn cool. It's a cool field, right? It's got you got the Derby winner, the Preakness winner, the Belmont winner. You got the Curlin winner. You got the Jim Dandy winner. You got the 2-year-old champion, and you got the horse that was the morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby. Like, that's a pretty damn good field.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's like, what else do you want? Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's perfect. I feel like, and I'm going to blank on it, but in recent years, there was one Travers recently where you had all three, but I can't remember which one it was. So what do you think? I really am confused at the moment. I want to say, oh yeah, this one jumps off the page. But I just don't. I don't have it in me yet.
I Leading into the Kentucky, a lot of times in my handicap opinions, I use my old opinion and build off of it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to trust yourself to do that. You can't be wish-washy. You can't be too results oriented, and you can't let hindsight throw you off too much. You have to just kind of believe that your opinion you had was a good one and build off of it. I thought Forte was going to be the Derby winner. And my biggest hesitation was that he wasn't quite fast enough, but I felt like he was classy enough, and in the right setting, he would jump that triple-digit buyer hurdle when the race he was in kind of dictated it. He was never going to really do that by himself. So when Mage came back and won the Derby, it made me feel more comfortable that Florida Derby figure that was low actually could be a little bit better, because Mage came back and won the Derby and did it pretty impressively, albeit with a setup. Mm-hmm. Then Forte comes back and shows me that class again off whatever, an 8-week break it was leading up to, or maybe even longer than that, 9-week break that it was leading up to the Belmont. And then he finally did what I needed him to do in triple-digit buyer in the Jim Dandy after adding blinkers. Now I think it's all put together. He's the best horse. He's the fastest horse. And I think he'll win the Travers.
There you go. There you go. That makes sense. Again, that's the perfect setup there, right? And that's exactly makes a ton of sense.
Pete, it's been awesome. There's a couple of guests that I have, like, you can have them like once, because it's like, okay, like, you tell your whole story. That's your story. Great talking to you. See you next week. But there is some guests that I've had, you being one of them. I think I can have more than once. I can have to talk about things that come up, talk about new initiatives, talk about new announcements and things that you guys are doing at first, but then also to, you've got plenty of stories that we still probably could tap into with your time at Breeders' Cup, some of the big horses you were able to be around, and we'll definitely have you again without a doubt.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. This was fun. That hour flew by. That was awesome. Thanks.
All right. Well, good luck this weekend, and get hot.
All right. Stay hot.
I appreciate you taking the time. He's got Stewie S. Inquiry running around. He's got Rosie. He's got Sienna. He's got a full house. So let him get back to work out here on his dark day, getting ready for Travers Week. I want to thank Qatar Racing again for their support. Looking forward to seeing some of their runners. See where Caravel shows back in. Look, I don't know if we even talked about it. I'm confident she didn't appreciate that ground that she saw in the Troy. She was bobbling in the stretch. They almost were going to scratch her. They wanted to run her on firm ground. She'll get that firm ground, I believe, in her next start, probably at Keeneland, I would think. And hopefully it'll be firm then. And even if it's not firm then, it will be firm in California. It might be a great opportunity to get back on Caravel. I want to thank everyone at In the Money Media, PTF, Drew, the rest of the team. And it's Travers Week. So you've got some handicapping to do. I've got some handicapping to do. We'll see you next week.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk.